Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read aloud of Mr. Scarborough's Family by Anthony Trollope. I am reading you this book with copious interruptions of my own, and I'm having a blast. I'm happy to know that a lot of you are having a blast too. This turned out to be a lot of fun. I want to read to you for the rest of time. Uh, and this is the story of Mr. Scarborough, the eponymous Mr. Scarborough, and the amazing ploy that he plays on the world in regard to his son Montjoy. But we are dealing right now with the Greys. We're dealing with Mr. Grey, who is Mr. Scarborough's lawyer, and his daughter Dolly, and also their relatives. Can't always pick your relatives, and in this case, the relatives in question, the Carroll family, they live near to the Greys at Fulham Manor House, and they are, as Trollope might put it, not all they should be. They're Mrs. Grey, Mr. Grey's sister. She has no shame and very little sense of proportion, very poor judgment. It is basically a good person, I think. But she made the mistake. So many people have made it. Don't you make it, unless you're going to say that this BookTube channel is you making that mistake. Let's not go down that road. She made the mistake of marrying a drunken Irishman. And that's always the kiss of death. And rather improvidently, because Mr. Carroll is a sot. He's a wastrel. He's a gambler and a drunkard. So he doesn't make any money. He doesn't have a living. He's not capable of having a job. And yet, despite that, the family has been improvident enough to have a whole brood of children who have to be cared for. They have to be seen to, and there's no way to do it. The way that Mrs. Carroll strikes upon to do it is to live off her brother, who gives the family, upkeeps the family a staggering £650 a year. Which doesn't sound like a lot of money now, but at the time it was. It's the upkeep of a household. Not a very generous upkeep, but Mr. Grey isn't made of money. He pays for Bolsover Terrace, their house. He pays for the clothing and the food and the whatnot. No one else can do it. And despite that fact, the Carroll girls are poisonous little creatures. They are not grateful at all. They're mocking, wheedling, horse-laughing little creatures that really deserve to have that support withdrawn from them. They have no conception of how ruined their world would be if that conception were withdrawn. They have no conception. They're spoiled, in other words. And our chapter today is going to deal with that world. So those of you who have been complaining that, we seem to be wandering far afield here. We spent a while in Brussels. Now we're spending a while with the Carroll family. You're going to have to wait a bit longer. You're not going to be sorry with what's coming. But this is chapter 35, and it is called Mr. Barry and Mr. Juniper. So we know at least a little bit about who it's going to be about. Mr. Barry is Mr. Grey's partner in their law firm, who has just recently tendered an offer of marriage to Dolly Grey and been turned down. And Mr. Juniper is an older man who works with horses at Tattersall's, who has a house of his own, and who has proposed to Amelia Carroll, one of the Carroll girls. He said that he's willing to take her on as a wife, provided he gets a financial settlement. Of course, the Carrolls can't provide a financial settlement. So Mr. Grey says, I will settle £450 on Amelia, £400 for her dowry, basically, and £50 for the fixings of the wedding, renting a hall, gowns, and whatnot. And that I'll do likewise for all the other girls. They'll all get £350. £300 for the wedding, or £300 for the dowry, £50 for the wedding. A huge outlay of money. It hasn't happened yet, but it'd be a huge outlay of money. And Mr. Grey lays only one stricture, which is that he must approve of the marriage. And he will set inquiries afoot. He has already set inquiries afoot over Mr. Juniper. But before those inquiries bear fruit, we get inside the Carroll family just a bit. So that's what this chapter is. This is Mr. Barry and Mr. Juniper. The joy in Bolsover Terrace was intense when Mrs. Carroll returned home. We are all to have £350 fortunes when we get husbands, said Georgina, anticipating at once the pleasures of matrimony. I am to have 450, said Amelia. I do think he might have made it £500. If I had it to give away, I never would show the cloven hoof over the last £50. Just poisonous. She's still not grateful. She doesn't have a penny to her name, and she's still not grateful. But he's only to have 400 pounds, said Sophia. Your things are to be bought with the other 50 pounds. I never can do it for 50 pounds, said Amelia. I did not expect that I would have to find my own trousseau out of my own fortune. Girls, how can you be so ungrateful, said their mother. Yes, she plaintively asked them, how can you be so ungrateful, instead of, I don't know, punishing them, instead of disciplining them. So anyway, I'm not ungrateful, Mama, said Popsy. Popsy is the youngest, and she's plain, and think about the life she's going to have. Just think about it for a minute. I mean, you're not invited to pity the Carroll girls, but Potsy is still an innocent. I shall not be ungrateful, Mama, said Potsy. I shall be very much obliged when I get my 350 pounds. How long will it be? You've got to find a young man first, Potsy. I don't think you'll ever do that, said Georgina, who was rather proud of her own good looks. This took place on the evening of the day in which Mrs. Carroll had gone to London, where Mr. Carroll was about attending some of those duties of conviviality in the performance of which he was so indefatigable. Those duties of conviviality in the performance of which he was so indefatigable is Trollope's way of saying he's at the pub. He's drunk. On the following morning at 12 o'clock, he was still in bed, badly hungover. It was well-known fact in the family that on such an occasion he would lie in bed and that before 12 o'clock he would have to manage to extract from his wife's little hoardings at any rate 2 bottles of soda water and 2 glasses of alcoholic mixture, which were generally called brandy. In other words, he needs a hair of the dog. He needs a little pick-me-up, or he's not going to be able to move at all that day. I'll have a gin and potash, Sophie, he said on this occasion with reference to the second dose, and do make haste. I wish you'd go yourself, because that girl always drinks some of the spirits. What, go to the gin shop? It's the most respectable publican's, just around the corner. It's one of those addicts who won't go himself. He's too ashamed. He send the kid in for the drugs. Indeed, I shall do nothing of the kind. You've no feeling about your daughters at all. But Sophie went on her errand, and in order to protect her father's small modicum of spirits, she slipped on her cloak and walked out as fast as she was able to watch the girl. Still, I think that the maiden managed to get a sip in as she left the bar. The father, in the meantime, with his head upon his hands, was ruminating on the cocked-up way which the girls who can't do a turn for their father. You're not in a position to complain about anybody. But with the gin and potash and with Sophie, Mr. Juniper made his appearance. He was a well-featured, tall man, but he looked the stable, and he smelt of it. His clothes, no doubt, were decent, but they were made by some tailor who must work surely for horsey men and no others. There is a class of men who always choose to show by their outward appearance that they belong to horses, and they succeed. Mr. Juniper was one of them. Though good-looking, he was anything but young, verging by appearance on 50 years. She has been at it again, Miss Sophie, said Juniper. Sophie, who did not like being detected in the performance of her filial duties, led the way in silence into the house and disappeared upstairs with the gin and potash. So Sophie is already sipping alcohol, furtively. Mr. Juniper turned into the parlor where was Mrs. Carroll with the other girls. She was still angry as she could be, with her husband, who, on being informed the morning of what his wife had done, had called her brother a beastly, stingy old beau, because he had cut Amelia off with 450 instead of 500 pounds. Mr. Carroll probably knew that Mr. Juniper would not take his daughter without the entirety of the sum stipulated, and would allow no portion of it to be expended on wedding dresses. So the chance that Mr. Juniper is going to strike a hard bargain. Oh, Dick, is it you? Said Amelia. I suppose you've come for your news. Mr. Juniper's Christian name was Richard. On this occasion he showed no affectionate desire to embrace his betrothed. Yes, it's me, he said, and he gave his hand all round, first to Mrs. Carroll and then to the girls. I've seen Mr. Gray, said Mrs. Carroll, but Dick Juniper held his tongue and sat down and twiddled his hat. Where have you come from? Asked Georgina. From the Brompton Road. I came down on the bus. You've come from Tattersall's, young man, said Amelia. Then I just didn't. But to tell the truth, he had come from Tattersall's, and it might be difficult to follow up on the workings of his mind to find out why he had told the lie. Of course, it was known that when in London much of his business was done at Tattersall's, but the horsey man is generally on the alert to take care that no secret of his trade escapes from him unawares. and it may be that he was thus prepared for a gratuitous lie. "Uncle's gone a great deal farther than ever I expected," said Amelia. "He's been most generous to all the girls," said Mrs. Carroll, nearly moved to tears. Mr. Juniper did not care very much about all the girls, thinking that the uncle's affection at present moment should be shown to the one girl who had found a husband, and thinking also that if the husband was to be secured, the proper way of doing so would be by liberality to him. Amelia had said that her uncle had gone further than she expected. Mr. Juniper concluded from this that he had not gone as far as he had been asked, and boldly resolved, at the spur of the moment, to stand by his demand. £500 ain't much," he said. "These people." "Dick, don't make a beast of yourself," said Amelia. Upon this Dick only smiled. He continually twiddled his hat for 3 or 4 minutes, and then rose up straight. "I suppose," he said, "I had better go upstairs and talk to the old man. I'd see Miss Sophie taking a pick-up to him, so I suppose he'll be able to talk." "Why shouldn't he talk?" said Mrs. Carroll, but she quite understood what Mr. Juniper's words were intended to imply. "It don't always follow," said Mr. Juniper, and he walked out of the room. "Now there'll be a row in the house, you see if there isn't," said Amelia. But Mrs. Carroll expressed her opinion that the man must be the most ungrateful of creatures if he kicked up a row on the present occasion. "I don't know so much about that, Mamma," said Amelia. Mr. Juniper walked upstairs with heavy, slow steps and knocked at the door of the marital chamber. There are men who can't walk upstairs as though to do so were an affair of ordinary life. They perform the task as though they walked upstairs once in 3 years. It is to be presumed that such men always sleep on the ground floor, though where they find their bedrooms is as hard to say. I don't quite know what Trollope is getting at here. It could just be that he means that Mr. Juniper is a clumsy, ungainly man, but he isn't described that way. It could just be that Trollope is being snooty, that he's meaning to imply that Mr. Juniper never has to deal in proper houses. Or is he implying that Mr. Juniper is more or less tipsy? And that is he being extremely po-faced, roundabout in saying that he's tipsy, and that such men always are, and so they find stairs difficult to navigate. Mr. Juniper was admitted by Sophie, who stepped out as he went in. "Well, old fellow, B&S and plenty of it. That's the ticket, eh?" Brandy and soda. "I did have a little headache this morning. I think it was the cigars." "Very like, and the stuff you washed 'em down. You haven't got any more of the same, have you?" "I'm uncommonly sorry," said the sick man, rising upon an elbow in his bed, "but I'm afraid there is not. To tell the truth, I had the deuce of a job getting this from the old woman. He downed it right away. It's only had it a minute. Sophie just got there. She's steps ahead of Mr. Juniper, and it's all gone. And Mr. Juniper wants some, first thing in the morning." "It don't matter," said the impassive Mr. Juniper, "only that I've been down among the horses at the yard till my throat is full of dust. So your lady has been and seen her brother?" "Yes, she's done that." "Well, he ain't altogether a bad un. Isn't old Gray? Of course he's an attorney." "I never think much of them chaps." "There's a good and bad, Juniper. No doubt my brother-in-law has made a little money." "A pot of it, if all they say is true." "But all they say isn't true. All they say never is true." "I suppose he's got something." "Well, yes, he's got something." "And how is it to be?" "He's given the girl £400 on the nail." Upon this Mr. Juniper turned up his nose. "And £50 for her wedding clothes." "He'd better let me have that." "Girls think so much of it." Mr. Juniper only shook his head. "And upon my word, it's more than she has a right to expect." "It ain't what she has a right to expect, but I—" Here Mr. Carroll shook his head. "I said £500 out, and I mean to hold by it. That's about it. If he wants to get the girl married, why, he must open his pocket. It isn't very much what I'm asking. I'm that sort of fellow that if I didn't want it, I'd take her without a shilling." But as Trollope points out, as Mr. Carroll pointed out, but you are the sort of fellow as always does want it. There's no chance that Mr. Juniper would ever take a woman without a shilling. Here he wants to be bought. He wants to be satisfied with money. He obviously doesn't care about Amelia at all. "I wants it now. It's better to speak out, ain't it? I must have the £500 before I put my neck in the noose. There must be no pairing off for petticoats and pelisses." "And Mr. Gray says that he must make inquiries into character," said Carroll. "Into what?" "Into character. He isn't going to give his money without knowing something about the man." That is not good news for Mr. Juniper. I'm all straight at Newmarket. I ain't going to stand any inquiries into me, you know. I can stand inquiries better than some people. He's got a partner named Barry, ain't he? There is such a gentleman. I don't know much about the business ways of my respected brother-in-law. Mr. Barry is, I believe, a good sort of man. It's he as is acting for Captain Scarborough. Barry is dealing with Montjoy Scarborough's debts with his creditors. He's the one going around saying, all right, show me your paperwork. How much money did you actually give him? Not interest, not terms, just the money. Is it now? Well, it must be. It may be, for anything I know. Then there came a long conversation, during which Mr. Juniper told some details of his former life and expressed himself very freely upon certain points. How does he know that Barry's asking? There's only one way that he would know: if he's lent money to Captain Scarborough. It appeared that in the event of Mr. Scarborough having died, as was expected in the course of the early summer, and of Captain Scarborough succeeding to the property in the accustomed manner, Mr. Juniper would have been one of those who would have come forward with a small claim upon the estate. He had lent, he said, a certain sum of money to help the captain in his embarrassment, and expected to get it back again. Now, inquiries had latter been made very disagreeably in their nature to Mr. Juniper, but Mr. Juniper, seeing how the land lay, to use his own phrase, consented only to accept so much as he has advanced. It don't make much difference to me, he had said. Let me have £350, which the captain got in hard money. That's the deal that Mr. Gray has enforced and that Mr. Barry is collecting on, is that all of these creditors will pay only the money they've lent, nothing else, on the understanding that if they'd rather have something than nothing, because Montjoy Scarborough is not going to inherit Tretton Park, so they're never going to have anything if they don't have that. Then their inquiries were made by Mr. Barry, the very Mr. Barry to whom the subsequent inquiries were committed, and Mr. Barry could not satisfy himself as to the £350 which the captain was said to have gotten hard money. There had been words spoken which seemed to Mr. Juniper to make it very inexpedient, and we may say unfair, that these further inquiries into his character as a husband should be entrusted to the same person. And why? Well, if Mr. Barry found that Mr. Juniper's claims were fraudulent, then the rest of what he finds about Mr. Juniper probably isn't going to be good. He regarded Mr. Barry as an enemy to the human race, from whom, in general confusion of things, no plunder was to be extracted. Mr. Barry had asked for the cheque by which the £350 had been paid to Captain Scarborough in hard cash. There had been no cheque. Mr. Juniper said such a small sum as that had been paid in notes at Newmarket. He said that he could not, or rather that he would not, produce any evidence as to the money. Mr. Barry had suggested that even so small a sum as £350 could not have come and would not have gone without leaving some trace. Mr. Juniper very indignantly had referred to an acknowledgment on a bill stamp for £600 which he had filled in, and which the captain had undoubtedly signed. It's not worth the paper it's written on, Mr. Barry had said. We'll see about that, said Mr. Juniper. As soon as the breath is out of the old squire's body, we'll see whether his son is to repudiate his debts in that way. Ain't that the captain's signature? And he slapped the bill with his hand. The old ceremony was gone through of explaining that the captain had no right to a shilling of the property. It had become an old ceremony now. Mr. Augustus Scarborough is going to pay out of his own goodwill only those sums advanced of which he is indisputably testimony. Not promises, not scraps of paper. If you can document your claim, he'll pay it. Just what you lent, not anything else. Ain't he my testimony of this? Said Mr. Juniper. This bill is for £600. In course it is. Why don't you say you advanced him £550 instead of £350? Because I didn't. Why do you say £350 instead of £150? Because I did. Then we have only your bare word. We're not going to pay anyone a shilling on such testimony. Then Mr. Juniper had sworn an awful oath that he could have every man bearing the name Scarborough hanged. But Mr. Barry's firm did not care much for any law proceedings which might be taken by Mr. Juniper alone. No law proceedings would be taken. The sum to be regained would not be worth the while of any lawyer to insure the hopeless expense of fighting such a battle. It would be shown in the court on Mr. Barry's side that the existing owner of the estate, out of his own generosity, had repaid all sums of money as to which evidence existed that they had been advanced to the unfortunate illegitimate captain. they would appear with clean hands, but poor Mr. Juniper would receive the sympathy of none. Of this Mr. Juniper had by degrees come aware, and already looking on his claim on the Scarborough property as lost. And now, on this little other affair of his, on this matrimonial venture, it was very hard that inquiries as to his character should be referred to the same Mr. Barry, when they've already had words. "I'm damned if I stand it," he said, thumping his fist down on Mr. Carroll's bed, on which he was sitting. "It isn't any of my doing. I'm on the square with you." "I don't know much about that." "What have I done? I didn't send her to the girl's uncle, and she didn't get from him a very liberal promise?" "Promises? Why didn't he stump up the rhino? What's the good of promises? There's as much ado about the beggarly £500 as though it were £50,000. Inquiries. Of course he knew very well what that meant. It's a ghost of ungentlemanlike behavior. It's the most ungentlemanlike behavior from one gentleman to take upon himself to make inquiries into another. He is not the girl's father. What right has he to make inquiries? He's asking, not only does he want more money, but why didn't Mr. Gray pay it up front?" "I didn't put it into his head," said Carroll, almost sobbing. "He must be a low-bred, pettifogging lawyer." "He is a lawyer," said Carroll, on whose mind the memory of the great benefit he had received made some impression. "I have admitted that." "Pshaw! But I don't think he's a pettifogging, not Mr. Gray. £400 down, with £50 for the dress, and the same for most of the same to all the girls, isn't pettifogging. If you ever comes to have a family, Juniper, I ain't in the way. But when you are, and there's 6 of 'em, you won't find an uncle pettifogging when he speaks out like Mr. Gray. Good of Mr. Carroll, anyway. Hungover sot that he is, that he's defending this guy. He should be defending Mr. Gray. The girls would not have a penny without Mr. Gray. They wouldn't have anything." The conversation was carried on for some time further, and then Mr. Juniper left the house without again visiting the ladies, so he doesn't go and say his goodbyes. His last word was that if inquiries were made into him, they might well all go to Bath. If the money were forthcoming, they would know where to find him, but it must be £500 square, with no pairings made on behalf of petticoats and pelisses. With this last word, Mr. Juniper stamped down the stairs and out of the house. "He's a brute, after all," said Sophie. "He is. He is. But you girls aren't much better." "No, he isn't. What do you think? What do you know about brutes? Of course a gentleman has to make the best fight he can for his money." This was what Amelia said at the moment, but in the seclusion of her own room she wept bitterly. Why didn't he come to see me or just give me a word? I hadn't done anything amiss. It wasn't my fault if Uncle John is stingy. Cut these people loose. Dolly has been right all along. Cut them loose. "And he isn't so very stingy after all," said Sophie. "Of course Papa hasn't got anything, and wouldn't have anything, though you were to pour golden rivers into his lap." "There are worse than Papa," said Sophie. "But he knows all that, and that our uncle isn't any more than an uncle, and why should he be so particular about just £100? I do think gentlemen are the meanest creatures when they are looking after money." "You have the gall to say that, you little hypocrite." Ladies ain't half so bad." "Yes, they are. You are. He's no business to expect £500 all out." This was very melancholy, and the house was kept in a state of silent sorrow for 4 or 5 days, till the results of the inquiries had come. Then there was weeping and gnashing of teeth. Mr. Barry came to Bolsover Terrace to communicate the results of the inquiry, and was shut up for half an hour with poor Mrs. Carroll. Notice he doesn't even bother to talk to the husband. Nobody does. He was afraid that he could not recommend the match. "Oh, I'm sorry for that, very sorry," said Mrs. Carroll. "The young lady will be disappointed." And her handkerchief went up to her eyes. Then there was silence for a while, till she asked why an opinion so strongly condemnatory had been expressed. "The gentleman, ma'am, is not what a gentleman should be. You may take my word for that. I must ask you not to repeat what I say of him." Oh dear, no. "But perhaps the least said the soonest mended. He is not what a gentleman should be." "You mean a fine gentleman." "He is not what a man should be." "I cannot say more than that. It would not be for the young lady's happiness that she should select such a partner for her life. She is very much attached to him. I am sorry that it should be so, but it will be better that she should live it down." At any rate, I am bound to communicate with you Mr. Gray's decision, though he does not mean to withhold his bounty in regard to any other proposed marriage. He cannot bring himself to pay money to Mr. Juniper. Nothing at all, said Mrs. Carroll. He will make no payment that will go into the pocket of Mr. Juniper. Then Mr. Barry went, and there was weeping and wailing in the house at Bolsover Terrace. So cruel an uncle as Mr. Gray had never been heard of in history, or even in romance. I know it's that old cat Dolly, said Amelia. Because she hasn't managed to get a husband for herself, she doesn't want anyone else to get one. We know this is not true. Dolly's advice to her father, her command to her father, would have been nothing. Give them nothing. And she knows that about herself, and sends Mrs. Carroll to her father without any interference, knowing that her father's soft heart will say yes. If anything, she's done all she can, in light of her own conscience. But Mr. Barry has looked into Mr. Juniper and found a whole bunch there that isn't good. My poor child, said Mr. Carroll, in a maudlin condition, I pity thee from the bottom of me heart. I wish that Mr. Barry may be made to marry a hideous old maid past 40, said Georgina. I shouldn't care what they said, but take him straight off, said Sophie. Upon this, Mrs. Carroll shook her head. I don't suppose that he's quite all that he ought to be, referring to Mr. Juniper. Who is, I should like to know, said Amelia. But my brother has given his money according to his judgment. And as she said this, the poor woman thought of those other 5 who were in the process of time might become claimants. But here the whole family attacked her and almost drove her to confess that her brother was a stingy old curmudgeon. Mrs. Carroll is thinking about all those other girls and how hopeless this is, how many of them there are and how hopeless they are. They aren't educated, they aren't educatable, they aren't nice. They're the younger daughters. It's a nightmare. They aren't nice, and she has nothing to give them at all. Nothing. A wasteful, useless husband who sends his own girl out to get a morning drink. So we're still dealing with the Carroll family in this chapter, and you might view this as a digression. Maybe. It certainly is a digression. I always think of chapters like this, in novels like this, as Trollope. Well, of course, he's pushing his pen for money. This was serialized, so he needs chapters. But in addition to that, this is Trollope elaborating on how all kinds of people negotiate marriage. How all kinds of people do that. We're seeing all kinds of marriage or marriage-type relationships being negotiated. Whether it's Harry Annesley and Florence Montjoy, or whether it's Mr. Anderson and Florence Montjoy, or Dolly Gray and Mr. Barry, and also the Carroll family. So we are far afield from our main plots, though, so we'll see how soon we get back to them. We'll go on to the next chapter next time, and I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.